Take care. Thanks. Hopefully it works. Fingers crossed. Prayers, hopes, whatever. All right. Thanks, Dad. Bye. That was my dad.
It had been a draining week for David in Brazil and an anxious one for his family back at home in New Jersey.
You know, they're all pins and needles.
And in the final hours, with all the legal wrangling apparently over, it was hard for anybody to relax.
I wake up at 6:30 to this.
By 7 a.m. Thursday, 2 hours before Sean's Brazilian family was to hand him over at the U.S. Embassy, David's hotel room was already full of people, rushing him out the door.
Taryn, will I be able to log on in the embassy at all while we're waiting? And I'll be able to bring some of Sean's things inside, or?
Yeah, I think those will bright.
I was just trying to take a shower and get dressed and ready, and I was already packed. Just ready to get this done.
Were you nervous?
No. I've been concerned over and over for the welfare and well-being of my son, but not nervous.
David had been up most of the night, handwriting a thank you statement he hoped to read after his son was safely back in his arms.
And we will go to the ends of the earth to protect him and shower him with every ounce of love that we have. God bless you all. David.
I prefer when you don't read. Just say thanks. 3 or 4 words.
I'm going to give this to Congressman Smith to read this as a statement.
For Congressman Smith, who had stood steadfastly by David's side, his fight to bring Sean home had become a personal mission. And as the end game approached, the two worried out loud about Sean's safety.
I hope they don't hurt Sean more.
Counsel for David and then.
Yeah, it's like dragging my son through a mob.
Word was the Brazilian family planned to make a scene at the embassy, dragging Sean past all the waiting cameras.
They just want things done on their terms.
To the very end.
To the very end.
But by 7:20, David was ready to face whatever the morning would bring, turning to give our cameras a hopeful thumbs up before he was whisked out a back door of the hotel and into a waiting embassy car. It was Christmas Eve, but even in a city where 75% of the population is Catholic, it seemed no one in Rio de Janeiro was focused on Papai Noel. All eyes were on the embassy and the Brazilian family's home, as everyone wondered if they would abide by the court's orders. Right up until the last minute, as gift baskets and flowers were delivered to her house, Sean's grandmother continued to protest, arguing that this was an egregious mistake and Sean did not want to leave Brazil.
He is very sad. He was hoping that he could express his will. He has this right.
Concerned about a spectacle, the embassy made a public appeal.
The most important thing for Mr. Goldman, and certainly for his Brazilian family, is to ensure that Sean and his family members can have privacy.
And quietly, the embassy offered Sean's family a way to avoid the horde of cameras.
The embassy made specific arrangements so that the handoff could take place in a completely private, discreet location.
To simply drive into an underground garage where the transfer and the process could be done very discreetly and, in Sean's sense, privately.
But that never happened. Arriving half an hour ahead of schedule, Sean's visibly upset grandparents approached the embassy on foot. And as the cameras swarmed, Bruna's Brazilian husband, João Paulo Lindsay Silva, came next, his arm wrapped tightly around Sean. In his bright Brazilian shirt, there was no missing Sean Goldman. And in the crush of cameras, with people screaming, horns honking, helicopters circling, and police on guard, he looked like one frightened little 9-year-old boy.
Did it break your heart to see that?
Yes. It was torturous. And I saw them do this and I had to turn away. Why are they doing that? My poor son. Why?
It was hard to see how, if you had any genuine feeling for this little boy, you would parade him through a media frenzy that would obviously frighten him, that obviously would traumatize him for no reason at all.
The family's attorney would later emphatically deny that the embassy had offered them a private entrance. But David's attorney says both he and embassy officials repeatedly reiterated the offer for a more private handover.
I made the offer to the family's attorney, the offer that they could use the consulate's garage. I made the offer personally. This offer was not accepted. We did everything that was within our powers to avoid that kind of situation.
Inside the embassy, things got downright ugly. Even from the second floor, David says he could hear the chaos.
And I heard their attorney was yelling and screaming and cursed out Congressman Smith.
He actually shouted at me, "You're a liar," with his eyes bugging out of his head. Another indication of what David Goldman has been up against all these years.
During all the commotion, David was still upstairs, waiting to see his little boy.
I was upstairs in another room, and they asked if it would be okay if I allowed his grandmother to bring him up. And I said yes, of course.
And when he saw you and you saw him,
he was just saying, "I'm very hot," like talking to me like we've spoken for a very long time. He didn't ever once say, "I don't want to go with you, I don't want to be with you." But I just kneeled next to his chair and pet his head and held his hand and just told him how much I loved him, and he had no resistance at all. But at the same time, he was in a great deal of pain.
Ignoring all the frenzy, Sean began focusing on practical things.
He was saying, "There's a lot of snow. We need to get boots. I need a winter coat." So he's been envisioning it. He's been imagining it.
Sean's grandmother was still in the room.
She looked at me and just said, "Oh, David, so many things have changed." And I did ask her, why didn't you drive into the embassy? Why did you drag him across the street?
what'd she say?
She just looked at me. She didn't answer that one. And she said to me, "Will you allow me to see him?" And I looked at her and I said, "I will not do to you what you have done to me." And all she heard was the "will not." And she looked at me and said, You will not?" And I said, "I will. In time, we'll arrange that. You will be able to see him." And then I said, "But now, you need to tell him that you remember how good of a father that I was." And she spoke that to him.
Why was
in
that
Portuguese.
important for you to have her say that to him?
He needed to see that. And I also gave her a hug. He needed to see that.
A lot of people watching this might say, why would you do that, given the way you feel about this family and what they've done?
Because she still is his grandmother.
But any attempt at healing the deeply raw rift with Sean's grandmother would have to wait. Within an hour, the Brazilian family had left the embassy, and father and son were racing to the airport.
What was going through your head in terms of this little boy that you're about to take home?
I hope he doesn't have lifelong nightmares of that day.
The wheels would soon be up. Was a father's 5.5-year nightmare finally over? Coming up, liftoff.
Give me a high five. Wheels up, buddy.
David and Sean in the air and on their way. Exclusive, intimate glimpses of the plane ride home.
My little boy is 5 feet away. It's a Christmas miracle. And here we are up in the heavens.
When Dateline continues.